I'm going to hit
He set you
record
up for that.
right now, and we're recording. John, are you ready? Are, are
Yes.
okay. I'm a
Must
little
be.
John's ready.
nervous, so
Oh,
but I'm
good.
still ready.
Okay.
This is Philly and Storehouse podcast, and we have John David Mann on. If you guys don't know John David Mann, he's kind of a big deal, and he's written a few books, just a few,
Just a couple.
just a couple, and we're gonna get into talking about a lot of them. And he's gonna teach us how to write gooder, or maybe just good. And
Good is
yeah,
good.
good. Yeah, it's good. John, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you guys.
Yeah. So if you could, if someone lives like in like some deep hole somewhere and they don't read, they can't read, then if you could tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and just a little bit about you, if you could.
Yeah. So I sometimes describe my career as sort of like a pinball machine because it hasn't been very intentional in a way. I never kind of never know where it's going next. I started out as a musician. I'm a classical trained musician. My dad was a choral conductor, and my brother is a professional musician. My other brother's a professional musician. I started out professional musician. I play the cello. I was a composer. Like that was my deal. That was my plan. That was my career. That was my life path,
Wow.
or so I thought. But it turns out it wasn't. When I was 17, I dropped out of school, and some friends and I started our own high school. And I subsequently went to that school, graduated, and then went back and taught at that school. And it was like we created it, but we had people graduating and going to like Harvard, Yale, and state colleges, and it was crazy.
Wow.
This is back in the 1600s,
Yeah.
and so from there, I got really interested in nutrition, and I dabbled in that for it was my career for a while. I kind of bounced around, but everywhere I went, everything that I did, I always seemed to be the guy who was editing the newsletter or polishing up the piece of writing, the article, or whatever. I was editing stuff, and my parents were both teachers and writers, and I ended up on this sort of editing track. And for years, I edited entrepreneurial magazines, business magazines. I edited people's stuff, and then eventually co-wrote people's stuff. And that morphed into co-writing books, co-authoring books. And now I've got a career as an author. And, I'll probably do other things, but I'm pretty settled. This is what I do. I've been writing for over a decade. I mean, publishing books for over a decade. Published about 30 books, which sounds like a ridiculously large number. But I write like everybody else does, one word at a time. Most of them are terrible, and I have to erase them later. And I'm not being modest. That's just the truth. And I love what I do. I love it. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, basically, because writing is by and large an entrepreneurial sport. Unless you're like a staff writer for a magazine or something, if you're a writer, you're an entrepreneur. And so I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. That's what I do. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it until I change it.
Love it.
Yeah, I love that. I always say that. That's my opinion until you give me something better to believe in, then I'll change it.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, we just have to rewind a little bit. You started your own high school?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what is that? I mean, what is that? That seems extremely entrepreneurial, but like how does one go about doing something like that? Because I think there's a story there. And obviously from your books, you're a storyteller. I'm just kind of curious how that even comes about. And then to send people to Harvard from your made up high school is pretty amazing. So like, I got to know.
Yeah. Not highly accredited. And first off, I should say that I was blessed with parents who were incredibly supportive and and believed in me from day one and let me know that, weren't shy about it. And when I was 13, my mom was a school teacher. She taught Greek mythology, and she was a playwright. She was very creative, and so she wrote a lot of plays for her school kids to perform. And she also performed Shakespeare and this and other people's plays. And she dreamed up this trip where we were going to go to Greece and perform Prometheus Bound, this couple 1,000-year-old play, in the theater where it was originally premiered. couple
Wow.
thousand years ago,
Wow.
up in northern Greece, Kalambaka, and in the ruins of this old theater. Now, I was one of the, I think, 13 or 15, whatever kids who went on this trip. And a few months before we left, she said, I'd like to set some of the choruses in the play to music. And would you write the music? And I'm like, I'm 13 years old. I don't know how to do that. I can't do that. And she said, sure you can. So I did. Wow. And, I'd grown up around classical music my whole life. So it was in my blood, it was in my ears, but I did. It was my first composition. And I went on to write stuff, and I won some awards, and it was like, I got very serious about it. But that was my mom's way. She would just tell me I could do something, even if it was outrageous. She would just believe it. And that's what happened with the school. I had some school friends who were dissatisfied. I had friends all over the place at different public schools. And I had a few friends who were so disaffected with their high school. They weren't learning anything. They felt like they were being babysat for a year, every year. And they said, I wish we had our own school where we could actually learn stuff, like we could learn what we want to learn. And I heard about this, and a couple of friends of mine and I joined these guys, and we just decided to take it seriously. What would it be like if we started our own school? And my parents were some of the first to jump on board and say, well, keep thinking that way, keep talking about it. So we did. We spent a year just meeting and talking about it. We hired a director. We interviewed a couple of adults. We decided early on we needed a director. We hired this guy who had an incredible past in education and who had a very open mind, as well as a very fertile intellect. Fantastic guy. And he joined us, and we opened up the following fall. And the school ran for a good 10 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
Long after I was gone, it kept going.
That's crazy.
So, and I think it was probably my introduction to being an entrepreneur, to making something up out of nothing.
When I love that, just how your parents are clearly the empowerment of what they did, and that is just such an amazing story. I love all the elements of just how they encouraged you and into action, and then you guys did that. That's pretty cool. Thank you for filling in those gaps.
Totally, yeah, they were amazing.
That excites me too, and gives me kind of a challenge really as a parent. Both of us have small kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and that challenges me to kind of think outside the box a little bit and not be so much in this little window and like try to like keep my kids like safe. And
it's so tough. It's so tough. My father was an immigrant. He came here during World War II from Germany. He grew up in Germany. He had some Jewish blood in him, and things were very, very dicey. Yeah. He lived in very dangerous times, and he emigrated here and became a naturalized citizen, was conscripted into the U.S. Army and shipped to Germany as an intelligence agent, counterintelligence. Wow. But he was a guy who was incredibly grateful for what he had, and it was hard won, his life with his American wife and his newfound life as an American. And he had a wonderful career. He was a college professor, and he had this very secure financial position with these colleges. The university is very respected. And when I came along and wanted to do these crazy things, like I had offers to come teach at universities in composition, which I said no to. I want to go do this crazy thing. And I got to tell you, I give my dad credit, because it must have been so hard for him to see me throw away what must have looked like golden opportunities for a secure, amazing career for this crazy stuff that, he couldn't even put a name to. But he never told me I was nuts. He never told me I shouldn't do that. He never, he was just always there for me. And, hopefully it paid off, Dad.
I think it did.
I bet you he's super proud right now. No doubt in my mind.
People ask me where I went to college, and I go, I didn't. Sorry.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's encouraging for sure. I'm just thinking about all the ways that I can start doing that, now, with these young kids and kind of,
not always easy.
I
I'm
know.
a parent too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you go ahead, Stu.
I was just going to ask, how old are your kids, John?
No, they range from, they range from, who's the youngest? Like early 30s to late 40s to mid 40s.
Okay.
All kind of within about 13 years of each other. And they're all over the map. There's 4 of them.
Are they?
And
Okay.
and they're like from 4 different planets, possibly 4 different solar systems. And I got one who's a rocket scientist. I mean, actually, literally a rocket scientist.
Nice.
And one who's like got a job serving samples at a Sam's Club and is not quite sure what he's going to do with his life, and everything in between. It's just like, I love them all. I love them all equally, but they baffle me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's funny because, and we'll go into a book that I know a lot of our audience has read and recognizes, and we had Bob on previously, but The Go-Giver, I printed that out. I printed out in the easy Google search, and it gave the 5 laws.
Yes.
And I put it up so that I can look at it at work, because a lot of it is, so it's not just, I think it's more and most appropriate as a parent. And obviously it works for business, and it's great. And but that attitude to take that home and show the kids and really try to drive towards these, like, if you can get those 5 laws really ingrained in yourself, but also pass that to your children and get them conscious of that and build that into their lives, that has been formative. And my prayer is that I can, live up to that and imbue them with at least some of that to help them to start life that way.
That's beautiful. The book came out in 2008, The Go-Giver. That was the book that totally changed my life in terms of my career, because I had a plan. The expression, man plans and God laughs, right?
Yeah.
So I had this plan, which Bob Berg ruined. My plan was to be a screenwriter in Hollywood. I was like that.
Nice.
I was on that track, man. I was out there. I'd taken seminars out there. I had a teacher. It's like I was writing screenplays. And Bob asked me if I would to write this book. He had this book idea. He wanted me to write it with him. He says, I got this idea for a book, but I don't know how to write it. I can't write books like that. I write how-to stuff. This is like a story. I need you to write it. You write it with me. And so I was like, I got no time. I honestly said to my fiance then, now my wife, I said, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for the rest of my life. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I don't have time for this. I was very busy. But it's Bob, and because it's Bob, I should take a look at it. So I took a look at it and I fussed with it. And long story short, it ended up totally changing my life. It established my career as an author. So it came out in 2008. In 2009, we heard from a guy in Indiana who was using The Go-Giver with his senior class, a high school teacher, using the book with his senior class. And he's used the book with his senior class every year since.
Wow.
Right. 12 years later now, he's still using it. And we eventually wrote a teacher's guide together, he and Bob and I.
Nice.
So I've always said I can't think of anything cooler than kids reading The Go-Giver. Yeah. But what you just said, Dave, I mean, that's just like, yeah, I hear you. Maybe we'll do a parenting book someday, but that's a very cool idea.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe a kid's version or something, because I was actually gonna start reading it to them, but I'm like, the concepts my daughter would get it, but they're they're mature and but I think that'd be awesome. And so if you want us to help you write a children's version,
I was gonna make that suggestion. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
For those of you watching, when David just said is mature material, it's not like R-rated, just so you know.
Yeah, no, not mature.
Not mature
that
like
way.
That.
Not a mature audience, rated.
It's as immature as you could possibly want, really.
Yeah. And David's right on that edge, like kind of borderline of understanding it or not.
Yeah, I understand.
Not on that.
Does he come to you and say, Stu, this concept is difficult? What does it mean? Yeah.
Yes, all the time.
All the time. Yep. You guys, you nailed it, John.
Yeah.
It's like you're in our conversations.
There we go.
John, I'm curious, and as we've kind of read some of your books now and done research on you, it looks like every single book you've written is in some type of partnership form.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, kind of how that kind of formulates. Like, does Bob Berg say, "Hey, John, I have this idea. can you help me write it? I mean, is that kind of what happens every time? You know, Brandon Webb, hey, John, I got an idea. Can you help me write it? What does that look like?
Actually, funny you should say it that way, because the way you describe the conversation is almost exactly what happened with Steel Fear.
Okay.
And so I guess first I should back up and say, again, pinball machine. I didn't plan this. I didn't sit down and say, I'm going to write a lot of books, but I'm going to do them all as partnerships.
Yeah.
It's just kind of worked out that way.
Okay.
I've written a few books on my own. We were talking before we started recording about how to write good, right? That's like a solo book. I will write other solo books in the future as well, but these partnerships have just been fantastic. The way they started for me was very pragmatic. I'm not a fabulous marketer. I love to write. I love words. I love the whole process of writing. I don't love self-promotion, and I don't love promotion. I don't hate it, but I'm just not that good at it. It's not my wheelhouse, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone's got strengths and everyone's got deficiencies. So when Go Giver came along, Bob basically said, I'll make you a deal. You do the writing, I'll do the marketing. It's an oversimplification.
Yeah.
Because he participated in the story. He had done some writing too. And also I participated in the marketing, and I did, I do like shows. We're doing a podcast right now.
Right. But
by and large, my partner promotes, I write. Okay. So how that looks for me, say with Brandon Webb, we're talking about Brandon. Brandon was a former Navy SEAL, a Navy SEAL sniper. When he came back from Afghanistan, he started teaching the different sniper courses, and they enrolled him in redesigning the Navy SEAL sniper course with a partner of his for the 21st century. So he became master course instructor. He came off of that career in the Navy and became an entrepreneur. And when we first bumped into each other, 2009, Go Giver was just so freshly out. He wanted to write a memoir, and his agent, who's my agent, said, you need a writer. You're a good writer, but you need a pro. So we teamed up to write his memoir. That's how that came about. Our agent put us together.
Okay.
And that was a case of, I've done maybe like 10 or 12 memoirs. That was like, it's his story, I'm going to write it. Really clearly defined roles. So I interviewed him for hours and hours and hours, mostly on the phone, downloaded, transcribed. And then I would write, send it to him. We'd get in the phone. He'd say, yeah, this, we'd make some adjustments or whatever. But mostly I did all the drafting, and then we'd make final adjustments together.
Okay.
That's kind of been the process with every book. It was that way with Go Giver. I would draft chapters, send it to Bob. We get in the phone or on email, and we would adjust, and he would say, what about this idea? With Steel Fear, it was exactly that way. Brandon had this experience on the USS Abraham Lincoln. It was an aircraft carrier, nuclear aircraft carrier. He was on a Westpac 6-month deployment in the Western Pacific on the Abraham Lincoln. And this was the mid-90s. This is when women were just newly integrated into combat roles on warships. And the first female aviators in the Navy were first few generations of female aviators were just happening there when Brandon was in his deployment. Okay. And there was this event that happened, which was there was a serial molester on the ship.
Oh, wow.
There was this guy who would like sneak up to the women's bathrooms and reach in and switch off the light and then go in and grab somebody. And they never caught him. He did this like many times, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. They never found who it was. And it created this, it cast this pall of fear and tension on the whole ship. Not surprisingly, right?
Wow. Right.
And Brandon's perspective was, I mean, the Navy is, I don't know which branch you guys serve in. Navy. Okay, so you may confirm that I'm right in saying that the Navy tends to be a fairly buttoned up place, right? Yeah. Culture in a warship is a pretty orderly culture.
Yeah.
And Brandon said, and they were in no way prepared to cope with any kind of like crime spree. It just and he thought, what if these were murders? And that idea went ping in his brain and sat there for a decade until he and I got to know each other. And he had that conversation you just described with me when we first met. He said, would you ever be interested in writing a novel together? I was like, a novel, a thriller about a serial killer? Me, the go-giver guy? Yeah, that would be cool. It took us another decade to get to the point where we actually had the time to do it, but that's how it happened. And so that's how all the books have been for me. It's like somebody else brings an idea, or we collaborate on an idea, and then I grab stuff out of their brain, I mix it with stuff out of my brain with research, and then I draft the book.
Wow. And I think this is also a perfect opportunity. Still Fear, coming out soon. Excited about it, right? This is
Still Fear.
Yeah.
So this is talk about entrepreneur. Now here's sort of behind the scenes. This is a novel. It's a thriller, and I know people who've kind of said, well, you're such an established writer. You've got like more than 24 books. People know who you are. So it must have been kind of a walk in the park to get this thing published. It's not like that, and here's why. This is fiction. Yeah. This is like a totally different world than what I've been working in the last decade and a half. It was helpful to some extent that Brandon had this resume as a Navy SEAL. Who isn't fascinated with Navy SEALs? And I had this resume as a best-selling writer, but it's not fiction. And so it was a debut novel. We were completely unproven novelists. So when we wrote the book, basically it took 1.5 years to write the book. And that was 1.5 years without a dime coming our way from the book. We had no publishers. We had no nothing. Our agent didn't even see it. It was just us writing this book purely on spec, hoping that somebody would be interested in reading it. And when we got it done, if we had a 2-hour podcast, I could tell you like a 45-minute story about the process of getting it ready, because it started out, I ended up cutting out 1/3 of the book to fit it into what was the final form. There's more rewriting, more revising, more of a learning curve than on any book I've ever done. Wow. Because the form of a thriller is so tight. It's like it's got to stay really tight and lean. It's got to move and move and move and grip you and hold you through the whole story. So when we finished it, our agent took it to New York, and Bantam offered us a 2-book deal. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. That was some acknowledgement. So they said, yes, we'll buy the book and the sequel, which you haven't written yet. And we started, awesome. We started getting into production, and then we heard from, you can't see it here, but Lee Child, the author of the Jack Reacher books.
Oh yeah.
Lee wrote an endorsement that says, an instant classic, maybe an instant legend.
Nice.
Wow. I remember the day I got that email, I took it to my wife, and I was so emotional, I couldn't read it to her. I was like, I just look at my phone, and she had to actually read it, because like, holy crap, Lee Giles. And that opened some doors. And so it hasn't been published yet, but so far it has had a really, really good reception. And that's, pinball machine, man. I've got a totally new career I didn't see coming. It turns out I'm a novelist. I didn't know it, but there we go.
That's awesome. I can't wait till it comes out.
July 13th.
Okay. July 13th. We got it.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of brings me to another question of just being creative.
Yes.
There's so many challenges with creativity. I'm kind of the between the two of us, I'm the engineer. I was an engineering degree. David was an English major. We were college roommates for all 4 years. And so I'm in our business, our real estate business, I'm kind of the spreadsheet guy, making sure the numbers all work. And then he's kind of the big picture idea. And he always will check my emails that I'll send out, and he'll change all the words around and change tenses and make it all right. But, so for me, being creative is challenging. Because I'm kind of just that engineer mindset. So, I'm just curious, kind of. I know I'm guessing that there are some challenges that you've had along the way. I'm curious, like what that process looks like. What, how you take, hey, I got this idea, and then go from there. Hey, John, go.
It's a really, really good question, because I think this may be, I'm going to say this and then we'll find out if it's true or not.
Yeah.
I think the side that people often don't see when they picture the creative process, or when they imagine a painter or a writer or somebody doing something creative, or, for that matter, an entrepreneur who creates, Apple, or who creates, Wikipedia, or who creates Airbnb or whatever. we had this romantic idea of the creative process as like I'm sitting and brainstorming, and then I get a spark of an idea, and it's like I scribble it down, and it's like, you know, I'm spilling coffee over the page like Frank Zappa in 200 Motels, you know, whatever. It's like a crazy thing. That stuff is true. Obviously, you have ideas that come together. Often the creative process often happens, whether it's writing or entrepreneurship or anything else, when two unrelated ideas kind of collide. Like where Steel Fear really came to life, Brandon had this experience of a serial killer, or he had serial molester was the experience, but he had this idea of a serial killer on an aircraft carrier. That's already a very cool idea. Never been done that we know of. But we didn't have a hero. And once I kind of stewed for a couple of years, not you stew, but stewed. I stewed for a couple of years on who is this guy? And we came up with a Navy SEAL who is a mess, who has got this incredibly traumatic past, not from his military career, but from his childhood, and who is wrapped up in some bad stuff that happened in Yemen before he got on the boat. And he is just like a whole stew of a mess himself. I'll stop using the word stew. He's a whole cauldron.
It's appropriate.
If
it's a mess, then it's completely appropriate.
The guy is a total Dave. What can I say?
So there you
go. And once we had this troubled, conflicted, traumatized, disgraced Navy SEAL and the aircraft carrier and the serial killer, now we had a plot. Now we had a story. Anyway, my point is that so there's this creative process idea, but then there's the engineering side. Then there's the whole process of being systematic and following through. When I was a teenager, I went to a lot of parties with my high school friends, and we'd be in parties where at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., we'd all be kind of sitting around the living room, and everybody's like drifted off and fallen asleep. I was always the guy who was walking around picking up the paper cups in the trash bag, and I don't know why, but that was just always me. A lot of the creative process is actually like that. It's like you had this idea, but then you have to go back, sort back through it, and throw out the trash. Rewriting your stuff, taking the initial idea you had and testing it and saying, yeah, but does that really work? And what about this and this and this and this? And being really linear about it. So for me, there's kind of a ping pong thing or a tennis match going on between the creative process, which I find really hard. It's almost like, obviously I've never given birth, but if I had, I would say it was like giving birth. The creative process and the follow-up, which is like 95% of it. I mean, a lot of it is just is tedium, discipline, and craft. And the truth of it for me is I love the craft of it. You guys talk about being, the wordsmith and the engineer. I'm kind of like, I'm maybe more engineer than I'm not sure, but I love the systematic part of it, and you have to love it. You have to love the craft. I used to play the cello. You have to love scales. You have to love how you hold your fingers. You have to love working on your bow hand for hours at a time. You have to love the grunt of it. If you're ever going to take the creative spark of it to any place that's going to be outstanding and be of value to the world around you. So that's, I think, what, you have to fall in love with the whole process.
Yeah. Do you, do you like shut yourself in a room with nothing, that is going to distract you or go off on an island and write for days? Is that, yeah.
I actually once I'm in Florida right now. I'm in this little house in Central Florida with my wife, and we came down here originally to take care of her mom who was ill. We were here taking care of her for years, and we have a place up in New England, which is where we normally live. And we were down here taking care of her mom, who was in and out of the hospital, and I had a book deadline. And one day, we took a walk. We take a walk every day. And one day we were walking, and I was telling her, I'm having such a hard time getting this book off the ground that I got to have it done in 6 weeks, and it's just nowhere. And there's so many crises here. And she stopped me and she said, "You need to get out of here. You need to go. Just go north. Take the dog, go north, and I'll be fine with mom. And just go." She banished me, and she actually sent me up to the island, which was our house in Massachusetts, and I was there alone for 4 weeks or something like that, and I wrote a book. Nice. Mostly I go off, I get sent to my room, I get sent to the corner, like
Like I met.
Like Stu, yeah.
Mr. Glazier here.
Yeah.
I have two spots in my room. There's what I call my Marty Crane chair.
Okay.
Which is the comfy chair where I sit with a little table and nothing but a blank pad of paper. That's where I brainstorm. And then I got my workstation, which is where my computer normally sits. And that's where I sit and I take the stuff that I brainstormed and I process it and I get left brain about it. And it's all in my little home office I've spent time in Starbucks and airport lounges and stuff writing, and that works for me sometimes, but mostly, I hole up.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, one of the things I love about we mentioned before that I'm reading your How to Write Good or Gooder book. And, I think the English major nerd in me, I love writing but you also, you effectively put an engineering on part of it, a process to it, the concept, execution, exposure, framework that you use. And I think there's a number of things about this book that I did not think I was going to be as excited about this book as I am, to be honest, just because I was like, oh, it's a book about writing. I love it. I love it because it's so good for a number of reasons. One, because of that process, it gives somebody who maybe has a passion to write or tell a story or whatever it is, you're very candid about the framework. You're very candid about your experience and the process. But also one thing that's really sticking to me, like Stu and I are the kind of guys that we're always looking to self-improve, and why the Go Giver is so amazing. Right. And a lot of times I think people think that self-improvement equals self-help books. And one of the things that I'm really taking away from your book is you said, you want to write well or good, then you need to read good writing. And that's really inspired me to create a different kind of a reading list filled with fiction and parable and maybe some self-help, because it's that the creativity that you talk about, it's that filling your mind with other people's awesome stuff that gets you to a different place. So you through that book, you didn't know it, but you've become a mentor of mine, and you've inspired me to really look at what I'm consuming, to really be better. So I think it's awesome.
That's so cool. That is so cool. I've always really been fascinated with the concept of leadership, everything about leadership. It's always been a topic that's been not only dear to my heart, but it's kind of been, for many years, it was like my number one topic. When I was going to write a blog post or teach a course or do anything, that would always be the first thing I'd think of. My dad, as I mentioned, was a conductor, choral conductor. You don't get more follow the leader than a conductor, right? Who waves his hands and the symphony does something. But yeah, I'm intrigued with leadership, including the people that I follow, which is mentors, which is great examples, which is what fascinates me about a leader is not the capacity of a leader to tell people what to do, but the way that a leader kind of leaves clues that are easy to follow. Does things in a way, explains things in a way, frames things in a way that people who are following can go, oh, okay, I get that. I'll do that. It's not pushing people. It's like pulling people. We talk about this in one of the Go Giver books. I think it's the Go Giver Leader. Yeah, of course it is, the Go Giver Leader.
Yeah.
Which was, really, really fun to write. That was the book that my wife banished me to write, by the way, Go Giver Leader.
Nice. Well, tell her thank you for us.
Yeah. I will. I definitely will. So I hear you about that, man. I really appreciate hearing that about the book, because that book is a labor of love. I started out thinking I wanted to do something as a freebie, as a premium for people who follow my website. So I'll do something about writing. I'll put some articles together and maybe a couple thousand words, 5,000-6,000 words, and it turned into this full-length book.
It's a little more than that,
yeah. It turned into this whole book, which I give away free. I mean, because it's not published; it's just like self-published. And writing that was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. So it's really, really cool to hear. Thanks.
No, it's I guess just a small word of encouragement. It literally has been, and I'm not completely through it yet because I'm just digesting this thing. But I did not expect what it was, especially a free book. I would have paid a lot of money for that book, in all honesty, and what it has turned into has really been something that's just changed the way I'm thinking about writing, changed the way I'm thinking about reading. And no, it's awesome. So thank you for doing that.
That's so cool. I'm going to email you my routing number after the recording.
Yeah, exactly.
So whatever you think it's worth, just go ahead and send it on in.
Just
How
send a
much
check.
are you supposed to?
Yeah, right. When you say a lot, can you be more specific?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. I appreciate that.
So,
I will publish that someday, but not soon.
So what would be your advice for, a couple knuckleheads like us that do want to eventually write a book, that have some ideas and thoughts on something that we think that someone might want to read someday? Where do you start? Where does someone even start writing a book?
A lot of ideas that I've had that find their way into books started out, had their first life in a blog post I wrote, in a conference call. I used to do conference calls. I had a sales business. I used to do conference calls for my team. And I would get off a call. I would be in the middle of a call and hear myself say something and said, oh, I have to remember that I said that. I didn't know that I knew that, or I didn't know that I had that thought. You may have had this experience too. I often find myself saying things, if it's on sometimes on a podcast or on a conference call, or even in an email I'm writing to somebody's asked for some advice or thing, and I'm writing and I see a concept and I go, oh, I got to remember that. And I've often had those ideas turn into blog posts, and I've had blog posts turn into ideas for chapters of books. And so I do think that one really helpful thing for aspiring writers who are book bound is to have some short form, some short form writing where you can take an idea, a concept, a theme, and complete it. Whether it's I used to have an editorial column in a business magazine that was 400 words long, and every month I had to write a 400-word column. And mostly I would draft it and it would be like 1,500 words. And the big challenge was how to fit this idea into 400 words, nice. Which was the best training ever, because it always got better and better and better and better, because my thinking got clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. I recently had to I had a whole series of quotes from How to Write Good that I was putting on Instagram and Facebook. And a lot of them didn't fit on Twitter. So my social media person came back and said, I can't get these on Twitter because they're too long. I had to condense them all. And so I had chop them and cut them and chop them. And I finished, I was like, these are all like better than the originals. Yeah, I should go back to the book now and chop the book down. So I do think short form writing that you publish, blog post, Facebook post, newsletter, whatever it is really, really great practice. And newspaper columns are just so awesome for that same reason. And then beyond that, in terms of, and often taking your topic and blogging about it, or some other form of social media-ing about it, tweeting about it for that matter, can help you sort of start to almost outline your book in public.
Yeah, I like that.
And then beyond that, I think, I just say, write. Best way to write a book is to start writing a book. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things that take away from me as well is to just start every day. I mean, you highlight in there every day, just get after it, right? Just writing and writing and writing, you get better and better and better.
Exactly. And I think it's so important. I was in a course the other night and the person said, what's, at the end they said, what's the one thing you leave people with? And I was going like, one thing, it better be good. But the one thing I had was, this is for writers, and it's, it's this, and it would always be this. And it's that you have to be prepared to do two different things. The first is just write without any self-editing, without any self-dialogue, without any critical eye. Just write like you're burning the house down. Write like you can do no wrong, just write the idea. And then you have to come back to it. And for me, it's usually the next day or even a few days later, or it's got to be some separation of time. You come back to it with a critical eye and be prepared to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, because it's going to get better and better and better and better. And there will be, at least my experiences, there will be, a bunch of what you write, more than 50% chances are, that's not very good. That's okay. That's normal. That's part of the process. It's like, an oak tree dropping, 10,000 acorns, and a lot of them are just going to rot in the ground, but it's not a waste of time. You've got to look for the germs, the seeds in there, the jewels that are going to really sprout, and they're in there. You know they're in there. But it's what most writers do is they try to edit while they're writing. Right? They write a sentence. It's like, in sitcoms. I'm sorry, not sitcoms, romantic comedies. You see, the person sits at the keyboard and they start to write a letter to this person that they admire, and they write a sentence and then they delete it, and then they write it again and then they delete it, and then they start again and then they delete it. That's cute and funny on a rom-com. It's tragedy for a writer. People do that. They write a sentence and then they take it out, and then they write a paragraph. They say, this is crap. They throw it away. And that's the death of the writer. So you have to just write it and then write more. That's the key. Write more, write more, write more, write more. Write the next page, write the next page, write the next. I'm stuck here. I don't know what to do. Fine. Skip it. Go to another chapter. Go to the end of the book and write that. Get an idea, drop it in the middle. You don't even know where it goes. Fine. Write that. Go to go for the low hanging fruit. Just write the parts that you do know. But I don't know how this ends. Fine. Don't write that. I don't know how it starts. No problem. Don't write that. I just have this idea. Write down the idea. Write down whatever you have. Don't worry about how it all fits. And then once you have a body of stuff, at least, a couple hundred words, a couple thousand words, a couple of pages, whatever it is, once you have a body of stuff, you can go back and approach it carefully. Approach it like the chambermaid the day after a party, and you're going to clean the room. It's like, ooh. Go in there and start folding sheets and throwing out trash and doing what I was doing with those parties when I was 14. Start cleaning it up. You're two different people, really. It's a little bit schizophrenic, but that's a writer's life. Schizophrenia.
Wow, that's awesome. I appreciate that process, and really, hopefully it inspires, because I think there's also an element of writing that we don't start because we think if we don't have that amazing thing, right, that we just there's nothing there. And you hit one thing, and I say this with caution because it was truly a humble moment for me. But when we do these officer meetings, so I'm currently a commanding officer, and so we'll do these officer meetings, and I'll say something, and there's somebody that's writing stuff down, and then 2 weeks later they'll read back the things that you put out. And I was actually, because I love, like you, love leadership, love the concept of leadership, want to write something about it, because I think people need it. I think we are in a leadership, a bit of an era that leadership it can be life changing for a number of reasons. But all that being said, they'll read something back, and I'm like, I said that?
I said that?
That's pretty good. And I accidentally let it out to my close circle in the office. I'm like, oh, wow, that was pretty good. And then they, of course, are like, dude, I'm like, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that I didn't.
Did you
realize
keep it,
that
write
was,
it down?
I didn't. But I didn't realize that stuff's in there, right? Because we have 20 plus years collectively of military, Stu and I, of military experiences leading as officers. Something's got to have stuck at some point. Yeah. And just digging it out. Stu probably not. And when you said 50% failure, I think Stu's probably closer to 75, 80% failure. Not important. But
I wasn't going to go there, but
it's but once you start, and I only highlight this to say that I bet you the vast majority, if not every single one of our listeners, if they just sat down and started putting some of these things from their brain on paper, there's going to be some gems in there, like you said. And it's a great process.
There are. And, one of the things that's such a challenge is that for a lot of people, they get the pen and the pad or the keyboard and the computer, and there's a sort of freezing that happens. Like, I don't know how to start. I don't know what to say. I don't know. And you had this idea that this happens to me all the time. I'm out walking the dog and I have this idea, and it's just such a good idea. This is great. And I get down to the keyboard and it's just not there. Yeah. I can't find it. It's like, I think I described it in the book as like trying to put smoke in your pocket. I mean, when you try to type it, it evaporates. A lot of people have that. And so you said something so interesting. You're having this meeting and you said this stuff in front of your guys in this meeting. It came out of you. It might not have ever come out of you if you were sitting down with a pad of paper. It might not have come out. So sometimes I think you have to kind of be on the hunt for the good stuff that pops out of you wherever it is. One thing I do now is I'm so glad I started doing this, and I've only been doing it for a few months. When I'm walking the dog, I have a recording app on my phone, and I will go down the block, and within a block, I just have this idea that I would never have gotten sitting on my desk. And I know this because I just sat at my desk for 3 hours. But I had this idea walking the dog. I tell him, he gets it. He thinks it's good.
He thinks it's awesome.
He does. He tells me. Whoa. So I record it. I'll just dictate it on my phone. And when I play it back, it sounds like a drunk person. I mean, it sounds like a mess. but it's still, I got it. Man, I got it. Ha ha, I've got you now. And I'll write it down. And you know what? A lot of the best stuff I've done in my books the last few months have come from strange, garbled messages from beyond that came onto my phone on this walk with the dog that I know I wouldn't have gotten sitting in this room. Something that I do, a discipline that I've learned, which works for me, is I'll often sit in my Marty Crane chair, first thing in the morning, cup of hot tea, blank pad of paper, pen, not exactly an agenda, sort of like an agendaless agenda. Like I have this, I know I want to do something in this chapter or in this, but I just let myself sit there. I might put music on. I might just put the noise canceling headphones on that give me sort of like an anechoic chamber. But I sit there in the quiet of the house and just kind of go, and let the thoughts go. It's sort of like poor man's meditation, I guess. It's like, and then maybe I'll throw some thoughts are kind of noodling around about the story or this or that. And suddenly, like, it'll be like you're looking at the night sky and suddenly there's one piece of fireworks about 10 miles away goes, oh, there's an idea. And I will write it down. And some days, so help me, I get nothing more than this. And I almost can't even read it. My writing's so bad. And I might get a sentence. I even described this in the book a couple of times where I just came up with a sentence which set the tone for the whole darn book, So sometimes I think catching that first idea, and I don't just mean the very first idea of the book, but the first idea of every page, first idea of every chapter, catching those little fragments of ideas that then take root and grow into writing. That's the hardest part sometimes.
I've found a lot of times where I'll get where I think are some good ideas are when I'm exercising. If I'm going on a run or riding a bike or I'm going for a walk. And there's a couple books that I've read recently. The Wealthy Gardener. We had John Saforic on our podcast.
Oh, wow. Yes.
He talks about going for walks, just walking and thinking.
Yep.
And then Keith Cunningham wrote a book called The Road Less Stupid. And he talks about thinking time, like actually putting everything away and just taking just like you, taking a piece of paper and just like ask yourself a question and just start writing. And I've started to do that a bit in the mornings of just that thinking time. And it really is good.
It's so great, isn't it? You know, I did something that I've never done before, and I honestly haven't done it much since. But for a while, I had read some writers. I'm fascinated with writers talking about what their process is, because they're so different, everybody. And in these days of Zoom, it's like there's a million great Zooms out there of famous writers talking about how they write. And I'd heard somebody or other talking about how they always get ideas when they're sleeping, so they keep a pad of paper and a pen by their bed so they can wake up and scribble things down, which I had never done. And I don't get great ideas when I sleep. I make noise when I sleep sometimes, and otherwise I just I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. I was asleep. But when I was struggling with, or I was working on before we were writing Steel Fear, and we had Brandon's idea, and I knew I wanted to develop this hero character, and I didn't know his name, didn't know his background, didn't know anything about him. I did that for a while. I put a pad of paper by and so help me, one day in the morning, early morning, waking up, I had these couple ideas in my head, and I scribbled them down, and son of a gun, if that didn't turn into this character, Finn, who sparked the whole book, and here it is, Steel Fear, coming to you on July 13. For me, it really came out of that scribble, that half legible scribble on that pad at 6 a.m. in the morning.
So, and that's super encouraging, because if Stu can get his ideas when he sleeps, because he averages about 10 hours a night, And his workouts, I would say maybe in the single to maybe double-digit numbers, because
Yes.
it's Stu working out.
Yeah,
If you
okay.
flip that script, Stu, I think there's probably hidden genius there.
Yeah, is there some promise in there?
Huh.
John, David makes fun of me all the time because I go to bed probably like 8:30,
Nice.
maybe 9 at the most,
Yes.
like the latest. But I wake up early. And I'm a pilot by trade, so we're naturally known to like get a lot of sleep. So he's always making fun of me. So.
I all my life I've been like a 7:30, 8:30 in the morning guy, which is ridiculous. I don't know how I ever expected to be productive, but that's what. And I started when I was on a fierce deadline with Steel Theater. I started getting up at 6 because it's the only way I could possibly. I had to do it then because we had this brand new puppy who was high energy, and we had the circumstance, and so I started getting up at 6. I was up at 6 for a year, and then I heard Don Winslow on a podcast, and Don Winslow is just such an amazing writer. He happened to mention that he gets up at 5 every day and starts writing. I thought, oh, Don Winslow gets up at 5. I got to get up at 5. So now I moved the clock back an hour. Now I get up at 5. So now I go to bed at 9, 9:30, 10. So I'm in your camp.
For me, that's when like my brain is at its best. It's get a cup of coffee and like that's where I'm firing kind of on all cylinders for me. And I know people have different different things towards that, but that's
when I was young. I was a night owl.
Yeah, if Stu becomes famous, then he's the 4 o'clock in the morning guy. So there's gonna be a challenge there. If he's I'm
not gonna listen to anything you said. I'm gonna turn off this podcast.
No. That's hilarious. Well, we're coming relatively close to the end. I know you have a very tight schedule, and you gave us a heads up that we only have till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, but we don't want to keep you to that because we could obviously talk for hours. But it's interesting because from your book, when you talk about just the labor of love and the effort put into it, and you use this book, The Recipe, as you use it as a failure to the kind of the process and why you didn't think it stuck. But that's going to be my next read. I'm going to jump on the website and grab it because cool. There's also just for our listeners from that book, How to Write Good, there's a reading list effectively that I'm just creating from some of the recommendations you made. So I'll be reading The Recipe. I hope I think it's funny how you highlight like it's your 1,500 books. I think you said sold but it's got a place in your heart. And so maybe it's also a prep for Stu and I when we write a book. If we sell 1,500 bucks, but we love it, it's good.
It's funny. That book, I think, reached fewer readers than any other book I've written. But it feels like those readers, it reached more deeply than any other book I've written, which is weird. But what can I say? I still think it has a second life ahead of it at some point. But we'll see. Anyway, I love that you're going to read that. That's fantastic. You made my day.
No, when I read that section, I'm like, this is a must read. You got to read it because if you're as passionate about that and the work that you put into it, I think it'll be awesome. So thank you for that.
And there's a military theme in there, which is hidden. You don't really know it right away.
We'll dig. We'll dig it out.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just extremely that you join us. We're super excited, and I would push people to your website, johndavidmann.com. Number of books there. You'll see obviously how accomplished, if you don't already know how accomplished of a writer John is, but the stuff you're putting out, more importantly than a number of books, the fact that you're partnering with military folks, writing books, and the Go Giver series has been life-changing for Stuart and I. So I just want to thank you and particularly you and Bob for putting something like that has literally changed our lives, and it's been so influential, so impactful, and something that I pray will generationally impact my family. But I just want to encourage you to keep doing it. What you're doing is incredible. This book, as I highlight, it's a free book, How to Write Good. I would encourage everybody to go to your website, grab a copy. It has been way more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. Great title, by the way. It really caught my attention. So just want to encourage you and just thank you so much for spending time with a couple knuckleheads when you probably could be putting out a masterpiece right now. So
I love being here with you guys, and I love what you do. I appreciate everything that you do, and appreciate everything you are. So thanks for having me here, and thanks for reading the books. Keep writing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for, all the encouragement to us. And I know you have a major impact, like David said. So guys and gals, go check out John's website, go buy his books. There's a ton of them, and man, there's some really, really good ones. So share this podcast, take a screenshot and blast it out on social media. Tag John on your posts, and hey, most importantly, let's go fill your storehouse.
Yeah, mark July 13th on your calendar. Book will be coming out. Still Fear, John David Mann, Brandon Webb. Can't wait. And make it a great day.
See ya.
See ya.